Everybody, Black Ninja 797 here, and welcome back to another video, guys. In today's video, we're going to be doing another Left 4 Dead 2 ranking video, and as requested, this is going to be ranking all the Left 4 Dead voice lines. Now, just like the prior video, the one where we were ranking the glitches, to save you guys a whole bunch of time, I'm going to be ranking them in a slightly different way. So instead of ranking individual voice lines, such as, I like this Ellis quote versus this Nick quote. However, though, I don't like this Ellis quote nearly as much as this Nick quote. So I'm going to be putting Ellis's quote here and Nick's quote right after, and then we're going to go back to Ellis. Or another example is being like, I think you guys would get really bored if I was ranking like all the moans and the grunt sounds, which don't even technically really count as dialogue. Being like, okay guys, coming in at the #1 spot is going to be when Coach moans when he's healing, because it sounds like that he's really enjoying himself. No, I'm not going to be doing that. So basically, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be ranking the voice lines in equivalence to their characters. What do I mean by this? Well, essentially what I'm going to be doing is that I'm going to be taking all the characters, including the NPCs, not necessarily just the main 8, and what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be ranking their voice lines just as a bundle. So, for example, if, like, let's say Zoe has more enjoyable voice lines than Lewis, altogether, what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be saying that Zoe has the better voice lines and she's up higher on the list. And if, like, Ellis ends up having funnier voice lines than Coach, then he ends up getting higher up on the list compared to Coach. That's kind of like the general idea what I'm going for. If you still fully don't understand, it will be explained as you watch the video. But that's basically what I'm going to be doing here for today. And like I said, I am also going to be counting the NPCs. So this counts for, like, Church Guy and Virgil as well, and not just the original 8. So we're going to be ranking a decent amount of characters here today, so that way we can still cover pretty much a good majority of the dialogue. I do apologize that I'm not going to be ranking literally every single quote ever, but we would be here for way too long if that was the case. So if you guys ever want to end up figuring out what my opinions are on some of them, you can always just feel free to ask me in the comments down below. But anyways, guys, let's end up getting on with the video and rank all the voice lines, or a majority of them, in Left 4 Dead. Alrighty guys, so coming in at our very first spot, this is going to be the Coldstream Chopper pilot. Now the Coldstream Chopper pilot, the reason why I put him at the absolute lowest is just because he is essentially a reused asset. Coldstream, for those of you that don't know, is a DLC map that's in Left 4 Dead 2 that was made by a fan. This was actually the first map to be made by a fan and not The Last Stand. And the thing is, though, is that it's just like with The Last Stand, you know, Coldstream is just reused assets. So the Coldstream Chopper pilot, the one that rescues you at the end of the finale, he is just the No Mercy Chopper pilot. He literally is just a reskin. He doesn't do anything towards the story whatsoever. He's just there to be there. So therefore, really, he doesn't have the most compelling dialogue out of anybody. It is just stuff we have heard before. So really, there is no point to put him up anywhere other than the very last spot, because it's literally everything we've heard before. So there's nothing new. There's nothing very compelling. And he is just essentially just there. It's as simple as that. Alrighty, now coming in at the next spot, this is going to end up being both the Left 4 Dead 1 and the Left 4 Dead 2 military. Now the military in the Left 4 Dead series, just like any of the other rescues that we have ever had, they really don't contribute much dialogue. They end up contributing a decent amount of dialogue, but they're only mostly talked about in reference form. So for example, if we were talking about the military, right, we end up hearing it mostly from the original survivors. We don't really end up getting dialogue in the heat of the moment. In the heat of the moment, it's just being like, we just need to escape and get out of here. If you want to end up getting info on the military in depth in Left 4 Dead, you're really going to need to end up looking at the comics. Because the comics give extreme detail on the Left 4 Dead military, and it allows us to be able to figure out who they actually are. And if you read the Left 4 Dead comics like I have, you will know that they are corrupt, which means that there really isn't that many good people there. Yes, there is a couple of exceptions of some military members being okay and decent people, but at the end of the day, truly, I feel like that it was just a mutual gain, like the enemy of the enemy is my friend type of logic. So they really weren't exactly on our side. But then again, though, I mean, they can be friendly enough that it might be proven otherwise. However, though, even though they might be friendly-ish, I still don't think that they really have that much to contribute. And even then, that's just the comic. That really doesn't count. If we're talking about just normal voice lines, which the whole entire point of this video was, really, there is nothing to go off of. It's just like, hey, we're here, we're gonna pick you up, get to this specific area, otherwise we're gonna die if we can't get there in time. And that's basically it. You never end up hearing anything about the military except for in reference, mostly. If it's in the heat of the moment, it's in the heat of the moment, and you can sort of get a takeaway from that. That's literally it. If you want to just get dialogue from the military and try to get that to be your storyline info, you're gonna have a really hard time trying to conduct a whole entire story, because really you need to look in outside places such as the comics. So since you have to see them by means outside the video game, that means they're going to be lower on this list. Alrighty, now we have the Dead Air Pilots. Now, the Dead Air Pilots is going to be, in my opinion, a much more enjoyable NPC, and also just in general a better character with more intriguing voice lines. Really, any of the finale NPCs, or just the NPCs in general in Left 4 Dead, are going to be hard to rank, because they all pretty much have the very similar idea or concept with their dialogue of being like, hey, I'm here to help you, you help me help you, and then we can end up getting out of here together. And that's really it. That's really all they serve as characters, and they don't have really that compelling of dialogue. The only really compelling NPCs are like 2 of them, and they'll be later on in the video. But I would say that this character is one of the few, unfortunately, that just kind of gets mixed up. They are way too similar in Left 4 Dead to end up being like, I guess you could say, original. However, though, within reason, they are at least somewhat different, and this one, in my opinion, is different enough that I end up putting up higher on the list. Because the Coldstream one is just reuse assets. The other previous rescue with the military, they're just cut and dry, and you really have to get info about them outside of the video game, which is within the comics. So this is really our first NPC with decent dialogue that you can get fully from the entirety of the game, which makes them worthwhile of this spot. Alrighty guys, now coming in at our very next spot, this is going to end up being the No Mercy Chopper Pilot. For the No Mercy Chopper Pilot, this is our very first rescue that we ever end up getting in Left 4 Dead. And in my opinion, I feel like it was one of the best, because this Chopper Pilot in particular is very nice and kind to the survivors. And we see him more in the game than the other ones. He's not like at the very, very end. We actually, see him at the very beginning of No Mercy. Like, he's the very first character, actually, that speaks in Left 4 Dead, because, the very first thing is what happens. What do you know? You're on top of the apartments, and he swoops by, and he says, get to No Mercy Hospital, and then we are introduced to our character. So he's the very first speaking character in all of Left 4 Dead, fun fact. And that's just something I feel like a lot of people don't realize, that he talks a lot more than you think he does. He talks at the very beginning, he's always there at the very end. You can see him swooshing by in the middle with his helicopter, even though he doesn't particularly say anything. But his actions do also speak for him just as much as his actual dialogue. And in my opinion, he is very nice, very, very caring. And if you pay attention to some of his voice lines, he'll end up like having certain pieces of advice for the survivors, being like, hey, watch out for that tank so I can end up getting down to you sooner, or being like, oh, hey, I would love to help you, so, meet me here, or, like, at No Mercy Hospital. So he's like trying to not only like help the survivors, but he wants to be like specific and be almost affectionate towards them, and I like that. He feels very human, and it just sucks that he does eventually end up dying because of the fact that he's not immune. So when the survivors are picked up by him, he ends up getting the green flu and then therefore dies and turns, and that sucks. But I feel like that he was a very honorable man, even though we only knew him basically once. He ended up helping out the survivors, and if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't have the survivors that we do have today. Alrighty guys, so coming in at our next spot, this is going to be Whittaker, the gun shop owner on Dead Center. Now, Whittaker, alongside 2 other NPCs, in my opinion, are actually pretty good at character development. They end up carrying their own weight when it comes to their voice lines and just who they are as characters. And they're not forgettable like a generic chopper pilot, but they're not quite like a main character like the, main 8. So I would say that they're kind of in their own subcategory in the middle. And Whittaker is one of these guys. Now, Whittaker, he ends up having kind of like a stereotypical, America redneck type of idea, being like tough gun shop owner, and I'm gonna help you if you can end up getting me my coke. Very stupid, but like understandable, within the means of the comedy aspect of the game. And he's overall not the worst character, not the best, but he's just kind of like average. I would say that his voice lines are unique, because there really is no character like him in the game. He's the first character that's original and has personality. The chopper pilots and the military are being like, get to this point from point A to point B and I'll rescue you. Very straightforward. Whittaker's like, I see you're in my gun store, and I would normally shoot you on the premises, but I'll let you go, and I'll end up actually helping you, especially if you end up getting me some Diet Coke. Now, even though this might risk your life, and it might sound stupid, that's my deal. So, very unique, and we've never seen anything like his dialogue or a character like him ever again, which makes him stand out. And his mission, even though it can be ridiculous storyline-wise, it's fun. I enjoy getting him the Coke, and I always enjoy screwing around with him and calling him, like, you know, like, fat and all that stuff, because he's, you know, trying to, like, just be locked in a corner just drinking Coca-Cola. It wouldn't be surprising me if he also has a you know, connected Xbox 360 and is just playing the old school Call of Duties. But, yeah, he's just kind of one of those characters that, like, he's there, and, like, he's just only really just somewhat original enough that he stands out, but he's not, you know, obviously, like, one of the main characters. So he's just okay. I enjoy referencing him occasionally every now and again, but he's just an average character, and that's okay. Alrighty guys, now we have got Church Guy. Now, Church Guy, even though he only ends up saying a select handful of lines, and we only ever end up seeing him once. Now, even though this is the case, in my opinion, Church Guy is one of the most enjoyable NPCs with one of the most sets of enjoyable voice lines ever, because he's essentially insane. If you've played any other video game ever, there's always at least one basically mentally unstable person, and for Left 4 Dead, that is Church Guy. Church Guy is a character that basically is just there to screw with you. You see him once, he's in one particular chapter, and he inconveniences you and is responsible for calling a horde, and he's lost his mind, obviously, with the quotes that he says, such as better safe than sorry, and you can even see it written on the wall inside of the actual church room. Now, even though his, you know, voice lines are basically just on repeats, like better safe than sorry, better safe than sorry, better safe than sorry, and like, you know, ding dong, ding dong. It sounds stupid saying it out loud, I know, but it's the truth. Like, he's just a very out there character. He's got the uniqueness factor going for him, because he's basically psychotic, but I enjoy that. I enjoy that one character that's in a video game that's just flat out psycho, because it's just so different and funny sometimes that you can just make fun of it. I enjoy the memes that I can basically pull on this guy by just thinking of stuff off the top of my head because of the fact of the way he is. And I wish that they would have used him more, because they also end up having some other unique stuff with him, such as the fact that he turns into a zombie, which technically now he ends up like making zombie grunts, which I don't know if you necessarily count that towards his dialogue or not, because of the fact that he does become a zombie. But at the end of the day, even though his dialogue is short, he's just so unique that he has to be up higher on the list, in my opinion. And now, guys, finally the last character before we get on to the main 8. This is going to end up being Virgil. Virgil is, in my opinion, the best NPC in the game. He's the best character outside the main 8. Because you see him the most, you end up getting the most dialogue from him, the most unique dialogue, and overall, he is just one of the most enjoyable characters. You end up finding about some dialogue, such as dialogue relating to his wife. You end up finding out dialogue about him, about how he ends up having certain agendas and ideas about, like, trying to, like, end up rescuing other survivors, and he's also just a naturally good-spirited man. You can also find out dialogue about him just about, like, how he wants to end up helping you, and you can end up helping him, such as with getting the gas and all that stuff. And even though he ends up having, of course, the generic voice line every now and again where it's being like, get to the boat, or, like, you'll get from point A to point B, he has enough other dialogue to, you know, counteract that. He's unique, but he's also normal. He's not crazy out there like Church Guy, or even, you know, somewhat in between like with Whittaker. He's just a normal guy that's very humble and wants to help us out, and we see him the most. He's got, therefore, the most dialogue, and regardless of what his dialogue is, just because that he has the most, and he's also something that you just kind of have exposure to a lot, I feel like it bumps him up, just because other than the main 8, he's literally the only other character in this game that has any significant contribution to the story, ever. Because, like, even though there is some other human beings in Left 4 Dead, outside the main 8, it's so bland and boring, and Virgil is just refreshing to listen to. Alrighty, guys, so that was all the original characters in Left 4 Dead that were not the main 8. Now we're going to be moving on to the main survivors of this video. And the reason why I just wanted to mention that I was even including these guys before the main survivors in the first place is just because I feel like they still do contribute enough to the story and they were worth mentioning, because there is some notable characters such as Virgil and Church Guy and of course Whittaker that in my opinion the community does really like. Alrighty guys, so coming in at the first spot in terms of the main 8 survivors, this is going to end up being Rochelle. Now Rochelle, I know that a lot of people end up poking fun at Rochelle, but in comparison to everybody else that we have listed, she is actually quite an enjoyable character. And I'll say it in a serious way, I mean it. Rochelle is actually a good character. I know we poke a lot of fun at her, but Rochelle, I will say, honest to God, in comparison to some of the other characters and some other video games that I have also just seen in general, I promise you that, you are actually quite an enjoyable character. Your voice lines fall flat in comparison to the other 7 because you really don't contribute much. I would say, despite that flaw, though, you're a good character. You're pretty solid. We get to find out about Rochelle's personality through her dialogue, and that's how we end up having all the characters, you know, with their dialogue, because there's no bios in the game. There's no really other ways within the Left 4 Dead universe that we ever find out about them unless we hear them from word of mouth from the community. But where they also get those, it was also from the video game. Either that or technically the comics. But when it comes to the voice lines in this game, Rochelle, she has more than the normal NPCs, but in comparison to the other main 7, not that much. We find out about her job, and we find out that, you know, like, she has her certain hobbies and interests, but then she's also got some really, like, bizarre voice lines. Like, for example, there's I don't know if I can even find a clip of it, but there's one voice line in particular where out of nowhere, she's being like, I'm not going to show anybody my tits, or something along those lines, and it's just completely left field. I've heard this at the beginning of The Parish sometimes. It's just being like, so the first thing that you say when we get off of the boat is that line. It's like who mentioned this to you, and like, why are you bringing this up now? It's being like, was Virgil hitting on you, Rochelle, and you're uncomfortable? Like, do you want me to, like, you know, like, report him to somebody? Like, you want me to report Virgil to the zombie equivalent of HR if there is even one left? Like, what the hell? So it's just like random crap like that. And in my opinion, because Rochelle's voice lines are just random and sparse and really just honestly uninteresting in comparison to the others, that's just why she's got to be so low. She's better than the other NPC type of characters, but still lower than any of the other main survivors. Alrighty, so coming in at our next spot, this is going to end up being Nick. Now, with Nick, I personally don't have a problem with Nick. I don't want people to assume that I have a problem with Nick, because sometimes when I end up poking fun at certain survivors, people think I just flat out hate them. And just like Rochelle, I don't hate Nick. I poke fun at Nick, and I'll joke around saying sometimes I hate Nick, but that's just mostly a joke and satire, and I really don't have a problem with him. I just don't really care for his overly negative personality. So, for example, Nick, in comparison to, like, let's say somebody like Ellis, is like literally opposites of each other, the yin to the yang, if you will. I enjoy dialogue amongst Ellis and Nick sometimes just because they're complete opposites. It's funny when Ellis is overly positive and Nick gets annoyed with that, and he's like trying to, like, you know, upset him, like get under his skin. It's funny seeing Ellis end up irritating Nick, and also vice versa. They're basically like brothers. Like, they annoy the shit out of each other, and just hearing them bicker is funny. And Nick is like that, but because he is the more negative one and kind of like the instigator, I really just don't care for his dialogue. And I therefore end up putting him on this part of the list because Nick complains way too much. Almost just as much as Francis. And don't worry, we'll get to Francis's complaints in his dialogue very shortly. But in my opinion, Nick just complains way too much. And he's always just grumpy. Yes, he's got some genuinely nice voice lines, and he can be sweet to people. In fact, there was, I think, one time that he was actually very affectionate to either Rochelle or he was very affectionate to Ellis, when I think that one of them died in particular. And it was very sweet to hear him say that, because it's just the opposite of his character, but not so drastic that it takes away from his entire gimmick. But even though he can be nice at times, overall, just in general, most of the time, he's just an asshole. Now, Francis is a slightly different type of asshole, where he does it for more comedic value. Nick just does it just to be an ass. So, when it comes to his dialogue, it's just kind of just annoying to me. I mean, I like his dialogue to a certain degree, It's not completely terrible, and it's more original than what Rochelle's is, but just because it is original, and just because it is more than someone else, doesn't mean that it's good dialogue, you know? I would still end up having Nick rather than not having Nick. I'm just saying that right now. Like I said, I don't hate Nick, and I don't hate his voice lines. It's just that in comparison to the other characters, he's really, really negative, almost a little bit annoyingly so. And I would just say is that it's just in comparison to the other characters that I really just don't care for it. That's all. Alrighty guys, now coming into the next spot, this is Francis. So just like Nick, Francis is very similar in terms of my issue with his dialogue. Pretty much he complains too much. Now Francis, in comparison to Nick, his dialogue is less complainy and more jokey, and it's more to be like kind of like an instigator in a more playful way. Nick just does it for his own self-amusement, and he kind of does it to mildly irritate people. When Francis ends up saying something, he ends up doing it just because he's just trying to end up being like almost like a dork. He's trying to tease rather than try to instigate. You know, there's a slight difference between those two adjectives. Adjective as in like, you know, he's basically like trying to get that to be his almost identity. And Francis, in my opinion, when I say that he is an asshole and, you know, Nick is just purely an asshole, it's a very slight difference and a very thin line that you gotta walk. Francis, like I said, does it just to be funny. Nick just does it just because he can, and that's the huge difference, in my opinion at least, which makes Francis slightly more enjoyable. I really don't care for either of them in this regard. When they're both just being bitchy and annoying and complaining, I don't really like either of them in that regard. But when Francis does have the choice to end up opening up more and being genuinely a more nicer person, such as, for example, when he's flirting with Rochelle, you know, that's showing more of his enjoyable character side rather than just being the I hate everything man, because we all know about the I hate everything voice lines that Francis has said several times over again. But even then, at the end of the day, Francis is still enjoyable. I just don't really particularly care for that type of dialogue and just hear it on repeat in comparison to the other survivors. Alright, now you guys have no idea how much that this actually is gonna upset me to a certain degree, because I love this character. But just because I love this character doesn't mean I'm going to put them up unnecessarily higher than they need to be, because I'm trying to make this list, like I said in, you know, videos past, with the community's opinion in mind. If this was just solely my list, of course I would end up putting, you know, this character in a different spot. But this is going to end up being Zoe. Now, Zoe, I really do love her story, but if we're just going solely off of voice lines alone, which is different and not counting, for example, things like the comics and stuff like that, Zoe, in my opinion, is going to have to end up being ranked basically in the middle of everybody. So, a little bit better than Rochelle, Francis, and Nick, but not quite as good as, like, the other remaining survivors that we'll get to later. I do love Zoe. I really, really do love Zoe. She's one of my favorite characters in video game history, and I do enjoy her story. I really, really do. But the thing is in comparison to the other survivors, she unfortunately is just not stand out enough. She walks this thin line of being like very, very laid back and easy and just kind of just keeps to herself. But depending on the circumstance, she also has some other dialogue where she's more fun and goofy and bubbly and out there. And this can be sometimes also in a slightly different way where she is more out there, but she's in a more serious and I'm going to kick ass type of way. And she's got a lot of different vibes about her. Sometimes she's serious, sometimes she's not. Sometimes she's, you know, very, very, you know, like introverted, and sometimes she's also not. And like I said, that depends. And I'm more of a extroverted person, so I would much rather prefer to end up playing as somebody that's more extroverted like me. And I enjoy Zoe, and I play with her as a character on a regular basis because I know her story outside the voice lines. I know who she is as a person, and that's okay, but like I said, unfortunately it just doesn't count towards the list because we're ranking just the voice lines only. And in comparison to the others, I just have to put you down on the middle part of this, Zoe. But the good news is, though, is that she's at least more than all the other characters, so she at least gets brownie points for that. Alrighty guys, so coming in at our next spot, this is Bill. Now, with Bill in my opinion is one of the most easily recognizable characters within Left 4 Dead. I'll probably say out of the main 8, Bill is like 1 or 2. easily. Everyone recognizes Bill. He's associated with Left 4 Dead, most zombie games in general. In fact, that's why they reuse him a lot of the time for DLC within games, such as within Dying Light, and then also within Dead Before Daylight. They reuse Bill because he's so recognizable. Now, Bill, in my opinion, I enjoy him as a character. He's got a lot of cool-ass voice lines because he's basically the stereotypical old man, I'm gonna kick your ass type of figure. Like, he's basically badass grandpa. And it's really cool to end up having that type of figure within the game because you think within like a zombie universe you need to have generic, big, hulking, me strong, manly man type of people, but you'd be surprised that a veteran, a very old man veteran, can still kick some ass, and he ends up kicking ass good. Bill's dialogue, he doesn't mess around. He'll end up having some very seriously compelling dialogue. In fact, there's one rant in particular I know that Bill says on a regular basis within No Mercy that I really think is cool. I don't remember what the voice line was word for word, but it was something along the lines of being like, I'll see peace back on Earth if I have to murder every one of these goddamn bastards with my cold dead hands. And it was really, really cool. It's just being like, oh shit, Grandpa means business. So yeah, Bill's got some moments where he'll end up getting you going. Like, he really knows how to lead a group, and he's a very big leader figure. So he's really enjoyable to listen to, and that's why he's the main group leader of, Left 4 Dead 1. That's why he sacrifices himself at the end of the day, after all, because he's the leader. He's the main guy. He is the staple of the group. And in my opinion, that's something that you can't necessarily take for granted. You might not like Bill in comparison to, like, let's say Zoe, Francis, or Lewis, or hell, even Rochelle, Nick, or Ellis, or Coach, but you gotta at least respect the old man. Alrighty guys, now coming in at the next spot, this is Lewis. You might have not expected this, but Lewis is in the top 3. And I always make fun of Lewis. I always try to make a joke about Lewis, at least once every video. But I'll be honest, I really enjoy this guy's positivity. Lewis, even though I made fun of you over the years, everything down to your pill addiction, you are one of the most enjoyable characters to listen to. When the game is feeling very serious, he breaks up the tension by ending up saying something very funny or positive or lighthearted. And just because I make fun of him, say that he bitches a lot of the time, because you might have remembered my ranking video of when I ranked the survivors, I might just say he might bitches a lot. And I feel like a lot of people might have taken that too much out of context, because the thing is that even though, yes, he can be annoying and cowardly sometimes, if he wants to, Lewis can be a badass. Now, even though, yes, this is going to be technically referring to the comics, which therefore doesn't count, let me give you an idea of what he can be at least. If you remember the Left 4 Dead comics, there's one part in particular with his origin story, where when a zombie ends up attacking him in the men's room, he's basically taking a massive shit. And what ends up happening is that while he's taking a shit, then the zombie's attacking him and biting him, he defends himself by destroying the zombie and caving his head in. And his actions speak louder than words. Like, the man literally is the definition of, like, ass kicker in this moment. And even though we never see anything like this in game, Lewis is deserving of the top 3 spot, because I know deep down that if he really wants to, he could be the most badass character in the whole entire game. He just chooses to be reserved and be the nice guy. But if he really wants to, we all know if Lewis really wants to, he could be big black dick swinging McGee, and we would all be happy to see it.
Hold up. Wait a minute.
Alrighty guys, we've got 2 more characters remaining. Coming in at the number 2 spot, this is our friend Coach. Coach, in my opinion, is one of the most enjoyable characters in Left 4 Dead, and one of my most enjoyable characters to play as with video games, because he is very fun. He's an ass-kicking machine, he's comedic, he's got his voice lines anywhere from being like, I'm gonna end up destroying you and kicking your ass, to talking about a whole assortment of junk food and just being uberly jokey and rock bands and, manly man stuff. And he's just the type of dude that you want to pop a cold one with the boys and just chill and end up catching up with old times. And he is just such a fun and enjoyable person. This is the type of guy that you would end up having in a movie such as The Equalizer, and he would end up being the sidekick to Denzel Washington, and he would just be the ass kicker of the movie. He'd be that big bodyguard type of figure, where it's being he's really nice, but if you get on his bad side, he'll destroy you. And that's Coach. Coach is a very nice, fun guy that if he really wants to, he will kick your ass, and he will kick your ass good. Coach is so infamous with Left 4 Dead. I would say other than Bill, Coach is another one of those just recognizable characters, like instantly. Coach is also up in the top 3. Coach is infamous with Left 4 Dead. Easily, easily, easily. Everyone knows who he is. Everyone knows a lot about his dialogue, and he is not only fun, not only enjoyable, but he's also just like in Left 4 Dead and video game history. Most people, and if anybody, will never forget Coach. But guys, coming in at the #1 spot, this is everybody's favorite hillbilly, Ellis. Ellis has the best dialogue in all Left 4 Dead, period. He is such a goofball, it's ridiculous. He has so much random dialogue that it's ridiculous. He has a voice line for everything, from serious to non-serious. He's got a voice line about everything, I promise you. Like, try to look for a voice line talking about something and see if Ellis doesn't have anything to say about it. Just tell me. Like, I bet you that there's no situation where that exists. Ellis always has the ability to speak. He's the most extroverted person that I can think of within this game. He's always talking. He always has something to say, to contribute. And I love, and I'm pretty sure you guys love this too, is when he just goes rambling on about his friend Keith. Keith this, Keith that, Keith everywhere, and it's just ridiculous. It is literally a living meme about Keith. And I really hope that one day we'll somehow get Keith with Left 4 Dead, you know, whether it be a Left 4 Dead 3, like maybe they can have him as a playable character, that would be cool. Or maybe like we can even end up having a Easter egg about him one day, or like let's say that Left 4 Dead gets a DLC drop again, where they end up having another map, and there's something with Keith in it, like a note to reference, like as an Easter egg or something. Because Keith is just such a staple of this series, a staple to this video game franchise. And Ellis made it happen. Ellis has got always these fun stories. He's always got some funny nickname or joke about the special infected. He can be serious if he wants to. He can end up being, you know, comedic if he wants to. And he can even be sweet and loving to the survivors if he wants to. Especially Zoe, because of the fact that he has a crush on her. And we all know at the end of the day that Ellis is probably, if not, one of the most enjoyable dialogue-based characters in all Left 4 Dead. So yeah, guys, that is going to be it here for today's video. I do truly hope you guys end up enjoying seeing Left 4 Dead ranking of voice lines. I hope you guys end up enjoying today's video, and if you did, please consider dropping a like, comment, and subscribe to show your guys' support. If you would like to financially support the channel, I would definitely appreciate if you guys could go check out my Patreon. It is always linked down below in all my YouTube video descriptions. Or you guys could use supporter creator code BlackNinja797 in all caps in the Fortnite Epic Games item shops, because Epic's my very first sponsor, and they're sponsoring today's video, so shout out to Epic Games. But before we do go, guys, I just want to add a little bonus here for everyone that watched the whole entire way through, because if you guys watched through to the very end, I appreciate you. You guys are a G. And the one thing I want to mention with these voice lines is that even though there is really no way I can properly rank every single voice line in all of Left 4 Dead, I will just tell you this. My favorite voice line in particular is going to end up being this one right here. It is from our boy Nick, and it's one of the most badass things you will ever hear in your entire life.
I have not come this far to die now.
Nick might not be my favorite character, but every time I hear that voice line, I want to play as Nick. And I will just say this, is that this is one of the most badass voice lines in the history of video games. Let me know if you agree in the comments down below. Anyways, guys, I hope you end up enjoying, and peace out.
Hey, meme lords. Jesus here. And you better have enjoyed that video there by the eternal god Daddy Ninja. You should probably subscribe too, or the mighty Moab will come for your balls. If you enjoyed the video, you might like it too. And give me the memes. Flash, bang, boom!